Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are plunging into some really eye-opening material. It's from the book Grow a New Brain: How Spirit and Power Plants Can Protect and Upgrade Your Brain by Alberto Villoldo.
Yeah, this book presents a fascinating perspective. It really weaves together these ancient wisdom traditions with, modern scientific understanding, looking at brain health and cognitive vitality in a completely new way.
Absolutely. And our mission here in this deep dive is essentially to pull out the most important nuggets, the key bits of knowledge and insight from this material.
Right.
Think of it like a shortcut, helping you understand how you might approach protecting and, well, upgrading your own brain. And it might challenge some long-held beliefs about aging and health.
Definitely. And one of the biggest, maybe surprising facts right up front is that central idea. You might not just protect your brain, but actually, well, grow a new one.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit. Grow a new brain. I mean, that sounds pretty radical, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We've mostly been told the brain is, pretty much set, maybe declines with age. What does the book actually mean by this?
Well, yeah, that's the core concept this material really takes aim at. The idea that the brain is static, that it just inevitably sort of shrivels up as we get older. The book argues that's fundamentally not the whole picture. It suggests the brain is incredibly dynamic, capable of continuous regeneration.
Regeneration, like not just slowing down decline, but actual renewal.
Precisely. The source gets into the biological processes that make this possible. So there's neurogenesis,
Uh-huh.
which is the actual ability to grow entirely new brain cells.
Wow, new cells, okay.
Yeah. And then there's this thing called mitophagy. That's the process where your cells regenerate their mitochondria.
Ah, right, the mitochondria, the little power plants inside the cells.
Exactly. Crucial for energy. And the book says they can be renewed. And you add to that protein synthesis the constant rebuilding of brain components. The author suggests that through all these combined processes, the brain essentially renews itself on a cycle, roughly every 20 days or so.
Every 20 days. That is, well, that's a mind-blowing departure from the idea of just inevitable decline.
It absolutely is. But here's the key insight. This incredible regenerative capacity, it isn't automatic. It's highly dependent on factors that are, within our control, things like our diet and certain spiritual or energetic practices.
And I guess this potential for control leads right into the two paths the book talks about for how we navigate aging and health.
Right. It paints a really stark contrast. Path one is what the author calls staying in the grip of fate. This is, where you're kind of overtaken by disease, where these aged dysfunctional cells, the book calls them zombie cells, accumulate, and where chronic stress just leads to a decline in cognitive and physical vitality.
Yeah, the paths we often feel kind of resigned to, maybe.
Yes. But then path two is the upgrade. This is about actively engaging these regenerative processes to rebuild the brain's capacity, to regain clarity, improve memory, enhance emotional regulation, even access a higher sense of self and connection.
So it's really about actively choosing to forestall that deterioration and actually tap into some extraordinary capabilities we might have.
That's the promise, exactly. The book offers this alternative, a path to sustained cognitive vitality and holistic well-being. Not just living longer, but living with a higher capacity, a better quality of life.
What I find really interesting is that the book isn't strictly, a neuroscience text. It talks about blending ancient wisdom with modern science.
That integration is absolutely central to its approach. It doesn't just look at the biology in isolation. It weaves in insights from psychology and these deep wisdom traditions of sages from places like the Amazon and the Andes.
And this is where the power plants come into play.
Yes, it references specific plants and ancient practices that these cultures have apparently used for millennia. Not just for physical health, mind you, but for understanding life, death, and our connection to something larger, often called spirit or Mother Earth.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thinking about the author, Alberto Villoldo, he's worked with the neurologist David Perlmutter before, right, on that book, Power Up Your Brain. So he's been exploring this intersection for a while.
Right, exactly. This isn't his first foray into bridging these worlds, and this book seems to bring even more depth and, importantly, practical strategies to that whole conversation.
Okay, so before we dive deeper into the upgrade stuff, maybe we should understand what's working against our brains in the first place. The book points to some major culprits, and modern stress seems to be right at the top of the list.
Oh, absolutely. Chronic stress is presented as a kind of silent epidemic for brain health. The constant stimulation, especially from being plugged into digital devices, 204/7, it really stresses the part of our brain the book calls the M brain. That's the mammalian brain, specifically the amygdala.
The amygdala. That's our threat detection center, isn't it? Always scanning for danger.
Exactly. And the author argues this chronic stimulation can actually start to rewire our neural networks, making us more prone to addictive behaviors. He even uses that term user, pointing out the similar wiring patterns seen in both drug addicts and people compulsively using phones or computers. It keeps that ancient fight-or-flight system just stuck in overdrive.
Wow, that comparison is pretty stark. And the book gives that vivid example, mentioning online gaming platforms like Twitch being seen by some as, like, recruitment grounds. Training future warriors young, illustrating how digital engagement can feed this constant warrior mindset or heightened state of alert.
Yeah, it serves as a potent illustration of how our modern environment can inadvertently keep that M-brain hyperactivated, even when there's no physical threat.
And stress, especially the lingering effects of trauma, seems to impact this M-brain really profoundly.
It does, yeah. Chronic stress triggers persistent cortisol production, right? And the book highlights how this actually damages the hippocampus, which is crucial for memory and learning.
So memory issues,
Hmm.
they might not just be age. They could be very much stress or trauma related.
A significant contributor, absolutely. And that fight, flight, freeze response, controlled by these M-brain structures like the amygdala and hypothalamus, it can get stuck. In the face of modern non-physical dangers we can't literally fight or run from, the system can just default to a freeze mode.
Which I think a lot of people can relate to, that feeling of being paralyzed or just totally overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm. And the hypothalamus, it acts kind of like a thermostat for how sensitive you are to perceiving danger. The book explains that early life trauma can actually lower this set point.
Lower it, Mimi.
Meaning it makes individuals much more reactive, much more prone to triggering those stress responses, even in situations that are relatively benign.
Right. The book uses some powerful personal stories here, like the author's own story about being given a pistol at age 10 during the revolution in Cuba.
Yes, that one. And his grandmother's terrified reaction seeing Halloween costumes for the first time. These really show how deeply early experiences can program that danger response right into the M-brain.
And there's some fascinating research mentioned, too, that kind of flips conventional wisdom on its head, like Dr. Rachel Yehuda's work showing low cortisol levels in children of Holocaust survivors, suggesting long-term or intergenerational trauma can manifest differently than just constant high stress.
That's a really critical insight. Trauma's impact on the stress system is complex. It can involve dysregulation, not just hyperactivity. And that Emory University study with mice inheriting a fear of a specific scent, well, that adds another layer, suggesting these patterns can be imprinted or even passed down somehow.
And if that M-brain gets stuck in these fear-based imprinted patterns, what happens then?
Well, it can show up physically. Things like chronic fatigue, poor appetite, difficulty just getting out of bed in the morning. Symptoms, the book links to those low cortisol states and those persistent trauma responses. It's like the physical manifestation of that M-brain being stuck in freeze or perpetual scarcity mode.
Okay, so beyond stress, the modern diet is presented as another major downfall for our brain health.
Yeah, the source points to a really big historical shift. Roughly 10,000 years ago, moving away from these nutrient-dense, omega-3 rich, mostly plant-based diets of hunter-gatherers towards grain-based agriculture.
And it notes something interesting. Despite the rise of civilizations, average lifespans in places like ancient Greece and Rome were surprisingly short, maybe 20, 35 years on average. Whereas prehistoric ancestors, if they survived childhood threats, often lived into their 60s or 70s. Suggests diet played a huge role, maybe overlooked, even back then.
It really does. And fast forward to today, we have ultra-processed foods just loaded with sugar and unhealthy fats. The book argues these fuel the brain primarily with glucose instead of the healthy fats it actually prefers. And that statistic, 65% of the U.S. population being pre-diabetic and Alzheimer's disease increasingly being called type 3 diabetes, that connection is pretty stark.
And the imbalance in fats, way too many omega-6s from modern meat and dairy compared to the balanced ratio our ancestors likely had. That's linked to the rise of inflammatory diseases like cancer and heart disease.
The book even gets into the history of the sugar deception, highlighting how the sugar industry apparently paid scientists back in the 60s to downplay sugar's risks and basically vilify fat. That influenced dietary guidelines for decades with, well, devastating health consequences.
That's just wild to think about, how that shaped what we were told was healthy for so long.
It had a massive impact, yeah. And the source makes a really strong point that simple things, like getting enough omega-3s, say, the equivalent found in just a small piece of wild-caught salmon, is associated with a significantly lower Alzheimer's risk, like 60% lower.
Wow.
But information like this often gets overlooked or isn't heavily promoted, perhaps because, unlike a patented drug, fish oil isn't a massive profit generator.
It even mentions that ancient Roman fish sauce, garum, being prized for its DHA content. That's a neat historical detail.
Yes, it shows that some of this nutritional wisdom isn't exactly new, and it notes that even today, farm-raised fish often lack sufficient DHA because they're fed corn and soy, not their natural diet of algae and smaller fish.
Okay, another major challenge discussed is the internal wear and tear from toxins and cellular aging.
Right. This brings us back to the mitochondria again, those power plants. As they age, they become less efficient. They start producing more free radicals. It's a byproduct. The book links directly to oxidative stress. You can kind of think of it like an old car engine sputtering out more exhaust.
And that oxidative stress, it damages the cells themselves, including the mitochondria too.
Exactly. This damage contributes to aging. The book uses the term inflammaging, and it's implicated in conditions like depression and Alzheimer's. And this is where a critical concept comes in: senescent cells.
Ah, the zombie cells. I remember reading that.
Yes, exactly. These are aged cells that should trigger a self-destruct sequence called apoptosis once they've divided a certain number of times, roughly 50 times, known as the Hayflick limit. But these senescent cells, they defy that. They don't die, they just hang around.
And they cause trouble, like actual trouble.
Big trouble, according to the book. They accumulate and they start releasing these inflammatory signals that damage nearby healthy cells. This accelerates aging and contributes to diseases like cancer and dementia. And complicating matters, our body's natural ability to fight this declines after about age 35, as our production of our own antioxidants, like glutathione, diminishes.
The book has that really striking analogy for this. After 35, you need to eat something like, 40 pounds of berries daily, just to keep up with the free radicals from these aging mitochondria.
Yeah, it vividly illustrates the scale of the challenge, doesn't it? And toxins in our environment, in our food, water, air, they increase this problem. They create noise in our DNA copying process, leading to more of these zombie cells forming. There was a study mentioned on long-lived Chinese women having less of this epigenetic noise, supporting the link.
And once again, the book points out that powerful natural compounds that could actually help clear these cells, things like fisetatine and quercetin, are often overlooked by pharmaceutical research. Why? Because as natural products, they can't be patented for huge profits.
Exactly. It touches on the real challenges faced by researchers trying to study these natural senolytics. It contrasts the high cost of a pharmaceutical option with much more affordable alternatives available elsewhere, which definitely raises questions about priorities and health research and development.
Okay, so we've looked at the challenges: stress, trauma, diet, toxins, these aging cells. I mean, it sounds pretty daunting, honestly.
Yeah.
But the book shifts focus now, right? To the promise of the higher brain, the neocortex.
Yes, and this is where the potential for upgrading truly comes in. The book draws a really clear distinction between that M brain, which is primarily instinctual, fear-based, reactive, and the N brain, or neocortex. That's the part capable of higher order thinking.
Right.
Wisdom, creativity, complex problem-solving, optimism.
And says the M brain gets stuck in those unproductive dramas we talked about.
Yeah, spinning these narratives of being the victim or the perpetrator or needing rescuing, all rooted in rehashing painful memories. The higher brain, the N brain, offers a way out of that loop. The book brings in this concept of survival of the wisest, which was inspired by Jonas Salk.
Ah, the polio vaccine developer.
Right, the one who famously gave his discovery away for free. Salk believed wisdom was the key, not just strength or aggression, but wisdom was key to adapting to changing environments and internal stressors.
So the higher brain helps us adapt.
Exactly. It allows us to shift perspective, to see opportunities instead of just dangers, to respond to challenges with openness, curiosity, gratitude, originality. Rather than just reacting out of fear or old patterns, it's that shift from asking, why is this happening to me, to, okay, why might this be happening for me?
Like that simple little anecdote in the book about smiling at the airport attendant and maybe getting an upgrade. It's a small thing, but it illustrates that change in energy and perspective.
It really does. And the book even touches on exploring what seem like extraordinary human capabilities. It mentions studies like Philip Tetlock's super forecasters, people who can accurately predict complex geopolitical events better than intelligence analysts.
Right, and the CIA's Stargate project looking into remote viewing.
Yeah, these examples are presented not necessarily as fringe science, but more as indicators that the higher brain has this vast, untapped potential that we're really only beginning to understand, let alone explore systematically.
So the big question then becomes, how do we actually tap into that potential? How do we move towards upgrading our brain? The book suggests we don't have to wait for some crisis. We could start changing our internal navigational charts right now.
It outlines a pretty comprehensive, multi-pronged approach, bringing together all these different elements we've discussed. A core piece, maybe the foundation, is dietary strategy.
Focused on that primarily plant-based ketogenic diet idea.
Yes. The emphasis is really on fueling the brain with healthy fats, things like avocados, olive oil, nuts, MCT oil. The book sees these healthy fats as the brain's preferred fuel source, promoting a state of ketosis where you burn fat for energy. This is contrasted very strongly with fueling the brain primarily with glucose from sugar and processed carbs, which is seen as literally clogging the brain and accelerating those aging processes.
And it also recommends significantly reducing or even avoiding red meat, dairy, and eggs. Why those specifically?
Well, several reasons are given. One is quieting certain pathways, like the mTOR pathway, which is linked to aging. Another is reducing exposure to extraneous hormones found in some animal products that could potentially impact brain health or promote tumors. Also, cutting down on those excessive inflammatory omega-6 fatty acids. And finally, supporting a healthy gut microbiome, which is essential for extracting nutrients, especially protein, effectively from plants.
Okay, and the book also highlights key neuronutrients in those power plants you mentioned earlier.
Right. It talks about the importance of specific nutrients for supporting brain function and repair. Omega-3s, particularly DHA, are presented as critical for building brain cell membranes and also for producing BDNF. You can think of BDNF as like fertilizer for your brain. It helps grow new connections and repair the hippocampus.
Got it. And serotonin, we usually think of that for mood.
Serotonin is crucial for mood, yes, but it's also really important for regulating sleep. It converts to melatonin and for hippocampus repair. The book emphasizes that you need enough tryptophan, which is an amino acid from your diet, and a healthy gut microbiome to produce serotonin effectively. It makes that interesting point that ancient varieties of chickpeas apparently had significantly more tryptophan than modern ones, another example of how our food sources have changed over time.
What about those antioxidants and senolytics we discussed, clearing out the zombie cells?
Yeah, the book really stresses the need for antioxidant support, especially after age 35, recommending supplements like liposomal glutathione since our natural production drops off. And it highlights those natural senolytics compounds that help the body clear out senescent cells. Fisetin and quercetin are key examples, and the book details providing specific doses and noting they can have broad benefits beyond just cellular cleanup. They're described as kind of hit-and-run interventions.
Hit and run.
Meaning you might not need to take them constantly, but periodically to help clear out those cells. And it also mentions NRF2 activators.
NRF2. What's that again?
Yes, these are compounds like sulforaphane, which is famously abundant in broccoli sprouts, that basically activate your body's master switch for detoxification and antioxidant production. It's a way to boost your body's own internal defense systems, its ability to clean house and regenerate. And growing broccoli sprouts is presented as a really simple, accessible way to get a potent dose of this NRF2 activator.
Okay, interesting. And adaptogens, I've heard that term.
Adaptogens are basically plants and mushrooms that help your body adapt to stress and support various functions. The book lists several specific examples. Ashwagandha for stress, anxiety, sleep, focus. Rhodiola for endurance and stress resilience. Bacopa monnieri for calming and cognitive function and also BDNF. Lion's mane mushroom, also great for BDNF. Turkey tail for immune support. Reishi for calming. Cordyceps for energy. It gives recipes, too, for incorporating these. They're presented as natural tools to help manage the constant stress we face and boost brain performance.
And supporting those mitochondrial power plants is still a big piece of this puzzle, right?
Absolutely. Healthy mitochondria mean energy, efficient cell function, and they even play a role in regulating cell death appropriately. The book points back to certain plant compounds and nutrients we already mentioned, like those senolytics, fisetin, and quercetin, and some adaptogens like bacopa and lion's mane, as helping support mitochondrial health directly. It also briefly mentions some more advanced methods used in longevity centers, like IHHT,
IHHT.
interval hypoxia-hyperoxia training. It basically simulates high-altitude conditions, cycling between low and high oxygen levels to trigger mitochondrial regeneration. It shows how modern technology can sometimes align with these ancient goals of rejuvenation.
And then there's gut health. It
Yeah.
seems like everything comes back to the gut these days.
It's crucial, yeah. Your gut microbiome is often called the second brain, for good reason. It's vital for producing neurochemicals like serotonin and for helping you absorb all the nutrients from your food, especially from a plant-based diet. The book recommends addressing common issues like candida overgrowth, which is it's a DIY method for cultivating a beneficial yeast called Saccharomyces boulardii from overripe fruit, though it adds a note of caution for people who are immunocompromised or have Crohn's disease.
So beyond diet and supplements, what about lifestyle practices? Are those just as important?
Oh yeah, they're presented as absolutely essential partners in this whole upgrade process. Time-restricted eating, or basically just overnight fasting for about 6 to 8 hours, is recommended daily.
What's the main benefit there?
It helps downregulate those aging pathways we talked about, like mTOR, and it encourages ketosis and autophagy, which is your body's natural process of cleaning out damaged cell components. Sort of like cellular housekeeping.
Okay. And meditation is also key, I gather.
Yes. Presented as essential for quieting that reactive M brain, that constant chatter and fear response, and for activating the ACC, the anterior cingulate cortex, which the book actually calls the God brain. It's associated with empathy, intuition, compassion, higher consciousness. It requires focused, relaxed attention. The book points to how this combination literally changes neural networks, referencing studies with monkeys learning tasks through attention plus reward.
Makes sense. Exercise is in there too, of course. Can't forget that.
Definitely. A minimum of 20 minutes daily of brisk activity could be walking, cycling, whatever gets your heart rate up moderately. The book suggests a target heart rate of about 180 minus your age. This physically increases the volume of key brain areas like the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex, directly supporting memory, learning, and executive function.
And sunlight. That was maybe less common in health advice sometimes.
About 20 minutes daily, ideally in the morning or evening sun, is considered vital for regulating your circadian rhythms, your body's internal clocks. The book even suggests a specific sunbathing exercise. And it raises an interesting question, wondering if maybe the high rates of skin cancer in Western societies are perhaps linked less to just sun exposure itself and more to accumulated toxins making our skin overly photosensitive. It cites populations like Australian Aboriginals who traditionally spend much time in the sun with historically lower rates of skin cancer. Food for thought, anyway.
So bringing all these pieces together, the diet, the nutrients, the lifestyle, the book outlines a specific 10-day program, like a way to jumpstart this whole brain upgrade.
Exactly. It's designed as an intensive reset. The core actions involve shifting to a primarily organic, plant-based diet and completely eliminating specific detrimental foods: meat, dairy, eggs, sugar for that 10-day period. It includes growing and consuming those broccoli sprouts daily for the NRF2 activation we talked about, practicing overnight fasting, doing a deeper detox by clearing out all processed foods, alcohol, dairy, gluten, even coffee for those 10 days, plus the daily exercise, meditation, and drinking lots of water.
And it suggests starting on a Friday, maybe anticipating some detox discomfort over the weekend.
Yes, precisely. There might be some initial discomfort as your body adjusts and cleans house. The idea is that this intensive 10-day period helps reset the system, and then you transition into continuing with a primarily plant-based, brain-supportive diet as a sustainable way of eating afterwards.
Looking beyond just the personal program, the book tries to connect this brain upgrade to bigger picture challenges, doesn't it? Like navigating a world with advanced AI and climate change.
Yeah, the perspective it offers is that by upgrading our own brains, we enhance the uniquely human capabilities, things like emotional intelligence, creativity, wisdom, our capacity for consciousness and spirituality. Essentially, the things that machines cannot replicate.
So it's presented almost as a way for us to actively participate in the, what did it say, the reinvention of the human journey on Earth.
Mm-hmm. Moving our awareness away from constant fear, digital addiction, and self-centeredness towards a deeper connection with and concern for the natural world, accessing that higher wisdom to navigate these incredibly complex times we're living in.
And finally, in a perhaps unexpected turn for a book titled Grow a New Brain, the material includes a section that touches on life's end.
Yes, it introduces the topic of voluntarily stopping eating and drinking, or VSED.
That does seem surprising, yeah, in this context.
It's presented not as giving up, but as a potential strategy, apparently rooted in some ancient wisdom traditions, for achieving a peaceful, dignified death on one's own terms, particularly when nearing the natural end of life, as a way to potentially avoid prolonged suffering or unwanted, painful medical interventions.
And the book cites some evidence or experiences.
It mentions anecdotal evidence and even feedback from hospice nurses, suggesting that when managed appropriately, VSED can lead to a death that's rated highly for good quality, often occurring peacefully, sometimes during sleep within about 7 days, reportedly free from significant pain and suffering.
Hmm.
It's framed as part of understanding the full cycle of life, learning how to get out of this life alive, drawing from the wisdom of Amazonia elders. A final reflection, perhaps, on reclaiming agency and dignity even in the face of mortality.
So wrapping this up, the core message from this deep dive seems to be that your brain isn't just destined to decline. It's capable of remarkable regeneration. And you personally have the power to actively participate in upgrading it. By integrating this blend of ancient wisdom, specific nutritional approaches, and very conscious lifestyle practices.
It really offers a new map, if you will, a different way to think about navigating not just health, but life itself, moving away from a path potentially governed by fear and limitation towards one defined more by potential and wisdom.
It's definitely a lot to consider, and certainly pushes back against some conventional ideas about aging and brain health. We really encourage you to mull over these insights, maybe explore the book further if it resonates, and consider what practical steps might feel right for you.
And as you think about all this, maybe reflect on this. What does it mean to not just live longer, but to live wiser?